Welcome. We're going to give it just a minute or two here for some more people to join. We're glad. All right, let's get started. Welcome once again, everybody. Topic today is better collaboration for the suddenly remote using Microsoft Teams. And just to set the stage a little bit, I promise this will not be an hour of PowerPoint. But just to set the stage a little bit, the situation with working from home right now is not normal. It's just not. It's many people being encouraged or forced to work from home by the situation and by decisions in their company. And it's difficult. Many times it's from a location that's not very well prepared. It's with improvised tools and processes. It's with an organization whose culture is not built around working remotely. There's a background of considerable personal stress. It's not a normal situation. So the real key to making a difference is to look at what things you can control versus the things you can't. And one of the things that you likely can control at some level is what tools you're using to do your collaboration with people. That brings up our topic here. This is a quote from GitLab, a collaboration software company. But they make a very excellent point here that the principles of remote work are different. The way you conduct work is different. They use the example of comparing a multi-level office building composed to smaller offices somewhere else. And there were a few tools that were really necessary for that model to work well. You needed to have elevators and phones to be functional. So the tools you have vary based on the work environment that you're working from, and remote tools are no different than that. So if you're going to work remotely, especially if an entire team is working remotely, you have to embrace a change in the tool set that makes more sense for that situation. So let's talk a little bit about the tools that you're likely used to using when you're in the office, or even if you've done a blend of office and remotely before. It's probably focused on the 5 that we've got on the screen at the moment, right? And these are almost by definition pain points. Email is there, as we've had that for decades. We're very comfortable with it. It's the devil we know, but it is a painful thing. Same thing about the conference calls that we wind up meeting after meeting after meeting, call after call after call. The idea of using VPN to get access to things almost like we were in the office, that's the theory anyway, right? The shared drives and the remote desktops are, again, things that are typically used when people are going to work from home briefly. But these things hurt when you're working from home a lot. So let's talk about some pain points associated with them. First of all, email, when you're working in a completely remote scenario, the email snowballs. It turns into an avalanche because no longer can people just stick their head over the cube and ask you something or say good morning or anything like that. So a lot of things get siphoned into the email inbox that really aren't productive, that aren't helpful. And as a result, we just get buried in unread email. You may have seen this already. Many of us have probably been working from home for a couple of weeks at least now. And you might have noticed this trend that the email volume grows and grows and grows to the point where it's a force of nature, like the erosion of wind and rain. So that's harder in a remote scenario. So is the constant conference call thing. I mean, you have a day that's got meeting after meeting after meeting in the office. You do get some break in that, right? You're walking from room to room at least. You have some human interaction between. Whereas when you're working from home, especially in back-to-back meetings, it's like you're handcuffed to the folding chair and card table in your living room, right? It is exhausting to be on conference call after conference call after conference call. To be able to do that is difficult, and more so in a remote environment than it is in the office. The other 3 are tools that work fine in limited work from home scenarios, but really do become impediments to productivity if that's all there is. VPN is great. It's very secure, right? But many times it does slow things down. If you're working on limited bandwidth and you've got a couple of 3 people in your home that are trying to do VPN software, you'll notice a distinct drop in that speed, maybe even if it's only you. It also means a lot of times you are handcuffed to just the corporate device that got sent home with you. So you can't improvise and use the device that's right for whatever situation you're in right now because you're stuck to the one that has the VPN connection configured on it. Shared drives, we're used to them. We've had them for decades, but when you're working remotely, they're hard to get to and they're very static. You can't collaborate live on a document with someone because only one person can open it at a time. You don't get version control. You get all sorts of things that are difficult about shared drives, and that's worse when everyone's working apart. Remote desktops are great for what they are, but they really don't work very well as the primary remote tool. They are a necessary evil when you have to get access to some kind of a desktop application that you can only have when you're sitting in the network. So there are places where that works, where that's the right answer, but it really only should be used when necessary. So let's look at the alternative. Teams is an alternative to these tools in many different ways. And one of the primary things, one of the first things that people need to do when they start working with Teams is stuff that they might have done previously in something like Skype. You know, the one-on-one instant messaging, meetings, that kind of stuff. Teams does all that stuff and actually does it significantly better than Skype did it. Of course, you may be used to some other instant message tool in your organization, so I won't continue to do those comparisons with Skype specifically, but those are the kind of use cases we're going to talk about first. Those kind of things that you would have done in Skype before Skype. So you notice when we come in here, I'm in Teams, and I'm on the tab over here on the left that's called Chat. We have an activity feed that shows us things that are going on everywhere. We have a Teams place where we can find our shared messaging boards. We have a calendar for meetings. We have a place to manage calls, as well as file integration. We're going to look at several of these in our tour today and talk about ways that this can help you in a remote scenario. But let's start here in Chat. So this is where you can have chats one-on-one with people, or you can even highlight and isolate 2 or 3 people and have a conversation with them. Asif Rahmani, our CEO, is actually in the background on the call here. Oh, it looks like somebody's messaging me down here. There's Asif. He says, hi, everybody. All right. So it works here much like it would in other instant message tools. How's things? Right. Now, what's nice about this? Well, again, it's an intuitive interface that puts all those instant message things in the same application where you're going to be doing a lot of other things. So just that element of not having to switch back and forth. Yeah, that is true. Chicago is significantly colder than it is here for me in California today. Right? So it's good for that. We also get these little multimedia things that we can add, especially when you're working remotely and you don't get to have the same kind of human contact that you would normally with people. Then what happens a lot of times is things get misinterpreted. You don't get the emotion, you don't get the feeling that comes through in text-based communications. So Teams gives you lots of different ways you can do that. Of course, you can use emojis like you can in just about every other tool on the planet. We also have the ability to insert GIFs. So if I wanted to say something about staying warm, I could just search real quickly. I won't do this one, that's just too cheesy, but let's go with this one. Okay. Ta-da. Okay. So ways to do that. You've also got ways to do stickers down here, which is interesting here. If you pick one of these, you can change what's in the blank. These are pretty cool. Those for my webcam tag. So now, admittedly, these cosmetic things we're doing down here in the bar for GIFs and stickers and things like that are not productivity gains, but they really can help with the human connection. Okay? So it's nice to have those available. Notice that we also get integration with other things that exist in Teams and in Office 365. So if I'm talking with Asif and I want to quickly schedule a meeting, I can do it right here without leaving the messaging interface. Pick it up, schedule a meeting, one-on-one checkpoint. Notice it has time zones in it now, so I don't have to worry about trying to translate that. Let's say that I'm going to schedule this for 3:30 p.m. Send it. Okay. And now that has been done directly with Asif in a way, and it will show up if I go look for it in my calendar later. So IM works much the same as it does in many other IM tools with a couple of nice little features down here at the bottom. If you want to do a fancier message, you can even click on this little format button over here and you get a full rich text editing toolbar up here at the top. Okay. Nice to have. Now let's talk about meetings a little bit. That's another primary functionality that most organizations have some other tool that's doing, and you may want to keep using those other tools. But again, Teams, one of the advantages to using Teams is that you can do all of these things in the same tool. So if I click on calendar, notice it shows me things that have been put into my calendar here for me or by me. So I got several of those. Here's the webinar we're in right now. Here's the meeting that I just added with Asif. If I click on one of these, this is a Teams meeting, so I can choose to join it right up here at the top. When you're joining, you have a quick choice of what tool you want to use for things. Actually, camera's not going to work since I'm using it in GoToMeeting at the moment. I'll just turn all of this off. You see, it's a quick, easy way to join and verify your connection the way you want to have it. Other people get notified automatically that I have joined in this meeting. So Asif would get a little alert on his side that says the meeting has started, Eric has joined. It's a good extra reminder that it's time for that meeting. Okay. Once you're in the meeting, you get a control bar down here at the bottom. If you happen to be sharing your camera, then you get background effects you can use over here. You can blur it, or they have just recently added these fake backgrounds that you can use as well. I'm personally fond of this one. Okay. So again, I suspect since I'm using my camera currently, it's not going to work here in Teams. Yep, we couldn't use your webcam, and that's just because GoToMeeting has it locked at the moment. Okay. We have a chat window that can show over here on the side. We can look at the participants, including the ability to quickly invite someone else to join us. Lots of things that are available here. Quick, easy controls. Another thing that's available is the ability to quickly record a meeting. So you start the recording. There will be a banner up at the top that occurs. Notice that Asif has now joined us in the meeting. I can see that. It tells us that it's recording. Anybody that joins gets to see that. And when we're done, either if I want to just stop the recording or if I end the meeting, either way, I will end it. Then here in the chat panel, notice that that meeting now shows up here with any notes that were typed in there, including Asif's sample, as well as the recording shows up here in the chat. Okay. Now it's saving it and integrating with Microsoft Stream and Office 365. Really nice things that work in these. There's also features to automatically do subtitles at the bottom. You can even pick languages and things. There's all sorts of things that are really nice about the Teams meeting client. Now, most of that is probably not terribly new to you. There might be a couple of bells and whistles there that are a little different in Teams and most likely better. There are also some things that you may like better about your own meeting software that your company is using. So just like with every tool, it's a give and take. One of the big positives, though, is that you can do everything in a single tool. It's all integrated directly from your chat, directly with the security that's set up in your team. All those things are integrated and makes it easier for you to collaborate and work together. Now, another key thing that Teams can help you with is the idea of reducing the email volume that you're getting. Now, you might be thinking at first that doesn't make any sense. Just moving messages from one application to another doesn't really help me any. But actually, in this case, it can, because the real problem in your inbox is managing the flow of messages, right? It's in one big inbox, and unless you've created some complicated system of Outlook rules, it's all there in one big loose leaf pile, okay? And you just have to work your way through it. There's not really much of any way for you to divide up things that are important to you and things that aren't. There might be some automatic ways that your inbox tries to do that, you know, the priority and the focused and the other tab that you see in Outlook sometimes. There's other ways that other email tools do things like that too. But you don't get to control that very well, or at least the control is very limited. There are ways, though, where if you start to shift at least the internal messaging that you're doing with the people that you work with all the time, your team, there are ways for you to manage that flow of messaging better. The first problem, like we said right here, is the never-ending email alert, that little alert that comes down here in the lower right-hand corner of your screen that derails you from anything you're trying to work on, right? You'll still get an alert in Teams, although you can configure what kind of messages that happens for. Another problem with email is lack of transparency, right? We talked about the alert as a problem when people are replying all and it's a huge group of people. An example of my personal life where there was a list of about 500 people and everybody that received it felt the need to reply and say, yes, I got it, thank you. And then, of course, you had some of the 500 people that were complaining on reply all that, please take me off of this message chain. You've all been through that situation before, right? The email box overflows with things like that. The other problem, though, is where things should be reply all, and they're not. Okay? So you get a lack of transparency where some people reply all, other people reply to just one or two, so nobody has all of the conversation anymore. It's very difficult for you going back later to find something in the flow of thought as it goes with it, especially if you're looking for something that was said by someone else. Another problem in email is attachment overload. You may have quotas on your mailbox that make it very difficult for you to keep mail in there, especially if those attachments are eating up space. You also get the problem of having 1,000 versions of the truth. where you've got a document that's being reviewed and every time somebody replies, they give you another version of it. Well, what if two people reply at close to the same time? So the second one doesn't include the changes from the first one, right? This gets really difficult to manage over time. So there are real pain points to working in email. We just don't give them a lot of thought because we haven't had anything else that gave us a similar functionality that was better. Well, that's different now. Here in Teams, you can organize your messaging into different channels. You can do those one-on-one messages or just with a couple of people, or you can do it based on teams pre-created according to different groups of people that are working together or different subject areas where people can be interested. Once that's done, you can pick which channels matter to you the most and tune your notifications to match that. So a team board is created for an entire team, and then also Teams is integrated with OneDrive and SharePoint using Office 365, which makes it super easy for you to get around these attachment problems that we typically have in email. So let's take a look at how that works. Let's switch back over again. If you click on the Teams tab on our left-hand bar over here, you'll notice that it opens up a list of teams that I am a member of here. Now, we are a relatively small company at VisualSP when you compare us to the AT&Ts of the world, or the Wyndham Worldwide, or these large organizations, John Deere, Phillips, that have thousands or even hundreds of thousands of employees. If you're working in one of those larger corporations, you may wind up as a member of many teams. So this list could potentially be really long. How can you make sense out of the madness in this? That's one of the concerns that IT departments have about teams a lot of times, is the proliferation of teams. And how do you get people to find the ones that are important that they need to be in? So there are some ways to go about this. One thing I want to mention here is that one of these channels, like in our core team here at VisualSP, we've got different subject areas that have a lot of overlap in who works in them. That's why we're all on one team. So the permissions are set up this way for us. And then we have these different subject areas where we can focus on efforts that are for different parts of the business. So for one of these, I've got some choices. One of the things I can do is I can pin this channel, and now it shows up here in a new area. See above your teams, there's a pinned area where individual channels can show up here and be highlighted. Easier for you to find the ones that are important to you. The other thing to note is that by default, the default notification settings in Teams mean that you'll receive both desktop and notification and activity feed alerts when someone mentions you in a post, when someone direct messages you through chat, or when you're having conversations in team channels that show in your teams list. So down here, your teams, anything that's in the your teams area, in this area, you'll get those kind of notifications for. By pinning things up here at the top, you kind of give them an elevated level of doing that. So if you change your default settings, you have a way of highlighting the ones that are most important to you. So let's look at a couple of these things. This is the idea of how you promote something in your own little personal messaging scheme. How do you demote something? Like if, for instance, if I don't feel like I need to be part of the content conversation regularly, I could just choose to hide this channel. Notice when I do that, I get a little bucket down here of hidden ones. It's not gone. I can come find it here whenever I want. And in fact, if someone mentions me by name in one of those posts, it'll even tell me that there's information down there for me. But it gets it out of my quick view. It also changes those default notification settings. Another one that I might be, let's say for instance, this entire team of temporary parking, maybe I just don't think that's typically relevant to me. I can put that down in a hidden teams area down here. Again, it's not gone for me, but it deprioritizes that team and gets it out, clears up the clutter from my end user interface and also from my notifications. Let's look at what you can control about notifications. So the first thing to mention is that up here at the top in the title bar here for Teams, you'll see that there's a little place where a picture of your profile comes up. If you click that, there's a choice here to go to settings. This is not an overwhelming dashboard of 1,000 levers and knobs you can turn. It's a few important things, one of which is notifications. Now let's talk through some of these. We're not going to go blow by blow through every one of these and talk about every option you could do in each one. What I will do is when I can put up on our webpage where we post the recording and things afterwards, I can put a couple of links to some articles that are good about what these things mean and where they are. But those chat messages we were talking about here, the banner is the little alert that shows up down here, and the activity feed is that activity button back here, the tab at the top. So notice here the chat messages I could show to also get an email message about them if I wanted, if I was afraid I wasn't going to be watching it. That's something that I typically turn off very quickly. I don't want emails to come to me from the Teams app. One of my big motivations in using Teams is to reduce the amount I have to depend on email for things. So I choose just Banner. Some of these other things that we can do, for instance, if someone puts messages for you in a team channel, okay, and that can be controlled down in here. Notice we could again get an email about those things, or we could choose to only show them in the feed. If we do that, then I don't even get the alert down here. But when I'm looking at my Teams user interface, I'll see that I have unread things in the activity feed up in the top. Okay. So let's see, I'm going to put this back to Banner. Mentions are when you do an @mention of someone by name. And again, that's a way to elevate, to escalate a little bit and make sure that they're much more likely to get a notification that you're asking them a question. Okay. Let's leave these alone. But you get an idea, there's lots of knobs and levers you can tune here to control what kind of notifications you get. Do you want email ones? Do you want just the little alert that comes down here? Do you want them to go in the activity feed, or do you want them completely off? Okay. You can also change that per individual channel. So remember, I pinned something up here, but I can also come to any particular channel, whether it's pinned or whether it's down here further. For instance, if I go to support, I can choose channel notifications here, and I can pick specific settings for this channel. So in this case, if the support channel is not something that typically requires a response for me, if I'm really just included so that it's transparent and I can see what's happening there, I probably don't need the alerts at all. Yeah, I could choose to show them in my activity feed if I wanted to be a little more aware of what was happening. Okay. And in those cases, I would see it show up here. Okay. So let's talk about actually using one of these team boards. Here at the moment, I'm in the marketing channel. And notice that I could create a totally new message down here at the bottom, or I could reply to a message that's already been started. For instance, Michael Blonder, one of my colleagues, posted an article that he found particularly interesting about using Microsoft Teams. It is an interesting article, by the way. So maybe what I want to do is I want to reply to that. I want to continue this conversation instead of start a new one. So I can say, thank you for this, Michael. Now, if I just type his name, that's just typing like I would in an email or in a letter, right? If I want to actually make sure that he sees a notification on this, I might want to do a little bit more. Now, remember, based on what he chose up here, he might be receiving alerts and emails when people reply to him, or he might not. So if I want to make sure he sees this, because I want him to know I'm grateful, okay, I can do an @mention where I type the @ and then start typing his name. And now this becomes a dynamic reference to him. And now, even if he has those alerts turned off for replies, okay, he'll still get one as long as he hasn't turned it off for the @mentions. Okay, so it's a little more likely to get his attention. Let's click the post button here. He is online at the moment, so we'll see if he's watching and if he responds. Okay. Now, if I wanted to start a new conversation, let's go to a different team. Let's go down to the temporary parking team. So if I click down here, and I want to create a new message, but I want to start a new thread. One thing that makes it a little, oh, I did get a reply. See, there's my reply. So if I click on the alert, we'll go back over there. He says, thanks back. Okay. Works much like it would for individual instant messaging, but now those messages are visible for the entire team. So now if other people might find this useful, they can find it. Other people that are members of this group and this channel are able to come and find that information as well. Let's go start a new conversation down here in the temporary parking group. Let's say that I wanted to start a new conversation. One thing that makes that stand out a little bit in the feed is by clicking on this Format Post button. Notice when I do that in a team channel, I also get a line here to add a subject line. This is a very important post, with these for the appropriate level of enthusiasm. Okay. Now hear this. I don't have anything in my head to really announce here. Teams is awesome. That is all. Again, I've got all the normal rich text formatting I might want to do to make things obnoxiously bold. Okay. You've got font colors and sizes and paragraph formatting and indenting and bulleted lists. You can also do quoting. Ask not what your ... If I wanted to make that quote, I can do this, and now it stands out in the message. So what's nice is by formatting these a little bit, you can make this a more obvious start of a conversation when people are looking at it in a thread. You can also choose to do attachments. Remember, we talked about attachments in email are a problem. I could look at something that maybe I know is already in our team site. Okay, so I could choose that, or I could choose something that I've been working on my own. Let's pick one of these. I'm just going to I'll pick this one. It's an export from a planner. But notice I plop it in here. The Excel document shows up in here. It's uploading it. Now the question should occur to you at that point, where is it uploading it? Well, it's doing it in the file repository for this team. This happens automatically. It's an automatic piece of SharePoint integration with Teams. If you're doing it in the one-on-one chats up here, by the way, instead of doing it in the team chats down here, OneDrive is used for the chat ones. Teams is used for the SharePoint team site in the background. So I'm going to go ahead and post this. Now you notice the new conversation is here. There's a reply button down below. We'll see if Asif is watching our temporary parking feed. Meanwhile, I'm going to click away from there. That's a hidden team for me, right? We said that hidden teams are also deprioritized. So if he replies to me down there, particularly if he mentions me in a reply, which again happens sometimes, you reply once and you don't get any answer back and it's something important, you might reply again. Look, now I get an alert because he mentioned me. It tells me down here, notice that I have it, I get it in activity and I get it in that, but the hidden team doesn't have the same level of notifications that we would have gotten otherwise. We got this because he mentioned me. It automatically turns some of these other things off for me because typically messages happening in this team, I'm just not that interested in. I mean, I wouldn't tell Asif that if he could hear me, but maybe he's not listening. No fun to poke somebody if they're not listening.
Oh, I'm listening.
Okay, so good ways for you to use team boards. Now, the idea here again is that you can start offloading a lot of your internal email, the stuff that you're doing with your teams, put it in here instead. The main benefits from that is you can control your notifications. The messages are organized by topical area. So you post something in the marketing area, then the people that are interested in the marketing topic because of their role are going to see those things. They're going to be monitoring those more frequently, or they're going to have the notification settings set up so they know immediately if something gets posted in here. Other people that are less interested in marketing have access to it, and maybe they can tell up here when they look once in a while that there was something they want to go check out. Show you what that looks like, right? You can see all this. Okay. You get lots of these that show up in your activity feed, so you can review those intermittently through the day. Okay. So lots of good things you can do here with Teams. It also can help to liven up some of those communications that would otherwise be very dry in an email. Another benefit that people don't think of because it's not a feature, but another benefit is that there's a certain expectation that in an email, we're typing in complete sentences with proper grammar and all those things. And in an instant message tool, there's a lot less pressure on that. It's a lot easier to have fast communication back and forth with people because subliminally, we all expect it to be more informal in a chat-based communication scheme. So there are lots of reasons that this can reduce friction with you and your team. They can make it easier for you to communicate and to control the message or the flow of messages that you're getting. It's not going to reduce the flow of messages, but it will let you organize it and control which ones are alerting you and interrupting you while you're working. It also has this excellent control of the Excel file or the files that you include as attachments. Let me go back to that again. You remember, I added an Excel file right here. If I click on it, either because I'm the one that posted it or somebody else that wants to read it, notice it opens the file right here in Teams. I don't have to leave Teams to see it. I can also choose to come up here and I can turn on once it finishes loading. Tells me I'm in editing mode at the moment. There we go. I can turn on the comments tool right here within Teams, so I can add comments specifically in there. I can also turn on the conversation tool. Conversation tool is opening up that conversation within the team board. This is really great. Guess I could leave it as tis if we were working in the 1700s. Okay. I can see this, I can work on it. I'm in full editing mode here in Excel, but I didn't have to leave the tool. When I'm finished, I can leave the document. It takes me right back out into it. And notice the comments that I made while I was working on the document show up here, threaded along with the comment that had the document in it. Other things to mention. There is a tab up here at the top that shows me the file repository for this marketing channel. You can see this is a SharePoint document library. It shows me that document that I uploaded. It did it automatically for me in the background. And there's even a button here where I could choose to open this in SharePoint and see it in the web browser if I wished. Why is this important? Well, when you're currently working on things, then the conversation view of finding things is really powerful. It's an easy way for you to find something, again, that you know we just talked about because you kind of remember when it happened, right? Like, for instance, this is something a lot of us have slowly adapted to that somebody from my children's generation adapted to like that. It's funny with my son or my daughter, when I would ask them when something happened, they would almost invariably pull out their phone and open Instagram, and they would go back and they'd look at something they posted that same time, okay? And they could tell me, with just 15 seconds, they could tell me that was 6 weeks ago. Okay? The same thing can happen here because it's all threaded chronologically by when the post happened. However, once things get further into the past, you're less likely to be able to easily scroll through and find it conversationally. So those tools that you've gotten more used to using, things like a document library in SharePoint, okay? Those things become much more useful when you're looking at things in bulk. When you want to look at that in a more folder-based type of a messaging scheme, you can certainly do that there too, because when you put things here in your conversations, it's automatically putting them in SharePoint in the document library. That makes them easy for you to discover later, whether you're looking through the panel here in chat or whether you're looking through the browser in your team site. So lots of good things that can help teams replace internal email for you. I would have to say, please go
sorry
ahead.
about that. I was going to ask a question that one of the attendees is asking. Sarah is asking a question. If you hide a channel, do you still get the channel-specific notifications in the activity feed? Is there a way to only get notifications for the non-hidden channels?
For the non-hidden channels. Okay, so when we looked at this before, that I believe is the example that we just saw. It only showed up in activity feed because Asif mentioned me specifically. He specifically tried to get my attention, so it showed up in my activity feed then. Go ahead and put another one in there, Asif, if you don't mind. Put another reply, but don't mention me. And unless I've done something to customize it, which is possible because I played with this demo 100 times, okay, you'll notice that it did not. Is that something you've done already, Asif?
Oh, I'm sorry, I put it in the wrong place. Let me go back into temporary parking.
Okay, temporary parking.
There we go.
I'll go ahead and hide it. Okay, so you notice it did not show up in the activity feed for this. I'm not getting alerted to things that happen in that team because the team is hidden. Okay. Now, if I want to see something in the team, I can certainly come here and I can go through and scroll through that anytime we want. Okay. But just by putting it in hidden, it pulls it out of my normal messaging scheme. I'll only get alerts if someone specifically tries to call me into the conversation. Is that what you were looking for, Sarah?
Yeah, she's not responding yet, but I'll look out for that.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
Great question. Thank you for that. That's one of the things that's hardest to understand the benefit to teams until you see a couple of examples like that one, where somebody asks the question, you actually see the difference between it. You start to see why this is such a powerful thing and why it can really make a difference in how much you get taken off track during your normal workday. This has made a big difference for us here at VisualSP. Asif is one of those people that gets thousands and thousands of emails regularly. I think you told us the other day that you've got 300,000 unread items in your inbox currently.
Yes, that is correct.
Yeah. So most of us don't have quite that level of erosion, mental erosion that happens in our inbox. But you have some amount, and whatever it is probably growing if your whole team is working in a remote environment now. So do think about these things because they make a big difference. In fact, it's gotten to a point where Asif and I, when we're dealing with somebody and we know that they're going to need to do something to get our attention, we encourage them not to send us an email. Okay? Or if you need to send an email, that's fine, but make sure you come into a Teams area somewhere, either a one-on-one chat or on one of the team boards, and let us know that it happened. Okay? Because Teams is a much easier way to get attention because it's so much easier to tailor the flood. Okay. So let's see here. How much time do we have left? About 20 minutes left. This is a good chance for us to talk about integrations. We mentioned a couple of these already, but integrations are important because, as we mentioned, one of the key benefits to working in Teams is that you don't have to leave this application very often. Many of the things that you need to go back to over and over and over again, you can do right here in one application. That can really cumulatively over the course of a day can make a big difference. You can see I've still got a variety of things open down here at the bottom. But again, it greatly cuts that down. One way that that happens is by these tabs that show up here at the top. So you notice in this case, we've got the post tab, which is where this particular channel and this team is making their messaging with each other. We have the files tab that we looked already. This is an integration with SharePoint. When you create a new team, it automatically creates a SharePoint team site in the background as the file repository. So as you upload documents here, either directly to the library or back here in Posts, when you attach them to messages, they will automatically get put into that team site for you. That is great on a lot of levels, right? Because another problem with, you could always put a link in an email, right? There's nothing to prevent you from putting a link to a document there. But what if the people you're sending it to don't have permission in that site? Okay, they're going to click the link and they're going to get access denied, right? So what about those situations? Well, Teams is much nicer because you go to the conversation board where the people are that you want to share this with, you upload the document, and it automatically puts it in a place where they can get it. You don't have to think about it. We also have options up here to add other kinds of tabs. Now, one that we're particularly fond of here at VisualSP is a Teams app that we created to make VisualSP help items available to you here within the Teams app. So as an example, let me pick something more specific here. Let's say that I wanted to look up something. Maybe right now I'm trying to help somebody with OneDrive. So if I click on OneDrive, it shows me all the help items available to me that are related to this. So some of these, I may just want to click and open at myself. Quick open it, look at it. This is an animated GIF. Okay. Notice I also have a button over here where I can copy this. So if I found what I'm looking for, and I want to do this, I can then come over and I can share it with people down here. Control V, and I can save it this way, share it this way. But wait, there's more. Okay. Notice down here at the bottom, right where we had these other tools like GIFs and stickies, this particular app, the VisualSP app, gives us a button that shows up down here. So if you click on this, okay, it opens up a little box where I could search. Maybe I wanted some kind of a help item that's about Planner. I could search for that. Sorry, it's a little slower when I'm doing a webinar, screen sharing and voice over IP. Of course, you guys are probably experiencing that right now working from home, right? There we go. So let's say there's any one of these that I wanted to share with someone. I will copy the link for this item. And it automatically comes back out and inserts it as a tile in here that looks a little fancier than just copying and pasting the link itself. So now if I send this, anybody who has access to this board can see this. Some of them may get alerts about it if they were watching this board a lot. Or I could do this individually in chats one-on-one with people if they're asking me questions. So if you are a person that does support, that is either in IT or is kind of a champion for some of these tools, you may really like having this kind of help available. The other thing that I'll show you is how you can add it over here on the left. VisualSP is an app of a style that can be shown over here as well. You notice there are a few of these. So some of these are Microsoft tools, OneNote, Stream, Planner. These are things that work really well with teams. They were literally designed for each other. Okay, but you notice we can find us. So if I look for VisualSP here, I can choose to add it. And now it shows up VisualSP over here. So again, I can look up help items here. I have a search blank. I have ways to filter by what application I want to look for, and it's all right here. Okay. Other things that you can add, as we mentioned. Okay. Here's one that's a OneNote tab. I will mention that right now, Microsoft has made some adjustments with how OneNote and Teams interact with each other to try and help performance, since there's so many more people using these tools than would normally, with everybody working remotely. So you may wind up not using the OneNote integrations as much right now. They're not quite as live as they normally are. But OneNote is one of those things you can add. Let me show you here. If you're adding tabs in a team, you've got lots of things you can add here that are specific to things you've installed already. I'm going to pick Planner as an example too. So if we go to Planner, notice I could post a message automatically that we've added this. I'm going to use an existing plan. I'm going to pick, I'll pick the core team plan. Actually, let me do this one. Let's do the to-do one. Click Save. It'll automatically create a tab up here named after the plan that I put on here, and the planner board shows up right here. I can use it just like I could in the browser, but now I've got an easy place to find it right here where I'm doing all of my other kinds of collaboration. I've got an easy way to come and open up Planner and get my work done here. There's no means a limit to just Microsoft products. Notice we showed our product shows up in here as well. Shows up twice for me because I have our development version that we use internally also. But notice there's lots of other services across the web, different platforms, different vendors, lots of them here that offer you a way to add a tab to try and help you get these advantages, to make it so that people in your team and you individually don't have to leave Teams as often for those normal routine things that you do every day. So lots of good things here in Teams that can help to remove friction from your remote experience. Let's review a little bit. One is that you get some extra personality, even in the standard things like one-on-one chats. Okay? Even in group chats, you get those. You also get some extra nice features in the calendar and meetings that you're going to run. We saw that you can have subtitles. You can blur your background or completely hide your background with a fake picture. You get nice, easy tools to help you choose your devices and what level of sharing you want to do while you're entering the tool. Many tools give you some way to do that, but some of them are harder than others. Teams, I would say, is one of the easiest in that, in my experience. Lots of good things that make those basic core things that are probably already familiar to you, make them just a little better. We also have ways, if you start using the team channels here, we have ways for your team to collectively gain some control over the message flow that you have going in, because that can, again, get really difficult to manage in a remote scenario. And by organizing things into different teams and channels, by controlling your notifications in the places that are important to you versus the ones that are less important to you, then you're able to control that flow and be much more productive. You also have the ability to integrate with other applications, both Microsoft ones like this one, third-party ones like this one. Lots of ways that you can help make this a smoother experience. Another thing to mention that's an advantage for Teams that we won't show in a webinar is the mobile device support. There's a Teams app that you can install on Android devices, on Apple devices, just like you can here in Windows. So again, you can pick up these conversations, you can access the resources that have been shared, you can actually work and collaborate with people even from another device. That's even more important in a remote situation than it is in the office. I won't ask for a show of hands, but just think to yourself, over the last couple of weeks when you've been working from home, has there been a time when chaos broke out in the kitchen behind you and you had to quickly get off a call or get to another room or step outside? How much easier would that be if you could have done it on your phone? Right? It's really important for you to have easy ways to shift devices. Maybe it's not background stuff that happens. Maybe it's that your Wi-Fi bogs down. And if you can quickly go to a device that you have 4G or 5G on, you can continue and be productive without having to go through 15 minutes of troubleshooting and rebooting things. Okay? Cross-device is a big deal when you're working remotely. And Teams really helps to enable that much more than any of the other technologies we've talked about. Now, a couple of other things for us to consider. If your perspective is from an IT organization or from a decision maker part of your organization, there are some things to think about that are key decisions if you're going to allow people to use Teams in your environment. So one of those decisions is the if or the when question. So let's bring some of these up. Really, it shouldn't be if, it should be when. Many organizations may have been on the fence about whether they would ever use something like Teams in their organization, but the current situation of so many people being forced to work remotely and find ways to collaborate and be productive, Teams is a huge win. There is good business reason to do it. There's also, you'll probably find that your users are going to be more receptive to this because it can directly answer pain points that they're feeling right now working outside of the office. Okay? So put this in your plan if you have the authority to do so. Second question that's a key one is, are you going to encourage people to use Teams in the web or to download the client application and use it on their Windows devices or on their mobile devices or both? Actually, the web version of this works surprisingly well. When they first brought it out, there were some significant functionality differences between the web version, and there's still not everything you can do in the web, but all of the core functionality that you would need, you can do there. In fact, Asif for a long time, on the call with us, Asif Ramani preferred the web version for a long time because it didn't take as much RAM on his computer. Right? He's one of those, like many of us, that have a lot of applications open at any given point. So using the web was more efficient for him. You may find that as well. Some organizations rely heavily on VDIs, remote desktops, things like that. And maybe there are reasons that you do not want this app to try and be installed in those environments. That doesn't have to be an obstacle. The web works pretty well, but think that through. Think about whether you're going to allow people to create teams on their own. That again is a key concern for IT departments, is the proliferation of teams. So we're going to get teams that are redundant, teams that are out of date, or teams that are trivial that we really didn't need to have. My question for you, and that kind of question for you to ponder, is what bad things happen if we get some of those three things, some redundant, some trivial, or some out-of-date teams that are in existence, especially during a period like this, where our priority really is on adapting to the situation that we're in. So what's the downside of that? What's the penalty for that? And on the flip side, what could we gain by letting people create a team that serves a purpose and helps them to be productive? So even if you maybe think this won't be something you do long term, it may be something that you can consider for this short term when we're in this work from home situation that we're struggling through at the moment. Consider that. If you don't think that's the wise thing to do, there are ways you can stop that. The same way that you stop people from creating Office 365 groups, that applies to Teams as well. So there are ways for you to control that if you wish to. If you do, give some thought to what you're going to do to let people collaborate. You're going to need to pre-create some teams that help them. So create teams based on your organization hierarchy, departments and teams and divisions and things like that. Create some of those teams automatically for them. Think about projects. If you have a project management portal, you might think of creating a team for every one of the projects that's in the current live phase or something. Again, the problem here is not having too many teams. The problem is handcuffing people so they don't have a team where they can work. So give some thought to what can I pre-create for people. You can always clean things up as you get feedback, as you determine what's being used and what is not. Look to enable people rather than control them in this particular scenario. You'll find that people get a lot more done that way. The other thing you'll need to do is recognize that regardless of what you pre-create, you won't think of everything. It's just not the way it works, right? So have an easy way for people to request a new team. And when they fill out the request, if they do it appropriately, turn it around quickly so that they get something to work with. You know, you might consider just doing a quick form in SharePoint or in forms in Office 365 or Power Apps or something like that. Spin up something quickly and make sure those teams get created for people without a long delay. Another thought is, what about people outside of your company? There's two different categories those can fall in. You've got external users that you don't do anything to enable. It's enabled by default, although you can turn it off. But that's for people that are in other organizations outside that may want to be able to send a chat message to someone in yours or vice versa, or have a meeting. They cannot have access to team resources, but they can interact with individuals by default. Do you want to allow that continually, or do you want to shut that off? Guest users is different. Guest users is where you add someone to your organization as a guest, and then in turn, they can be given permission to different teams and different resources that are in there. They could also be given permission to other group resources and things like that in your tenant if that's helpful to do so. So there's a difference between these. Understand those and figure out what you're going to allow, what's important for your users. Another one is, how are you going to help your users get started? There are, of course, a lot of ways that you can do this. One thing that you might consider here is using something like what's called a fuzzy help desk. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but it's an informal place where people can ask questions and get answers, and alternatively give answers as well. So a good example for that, if you're adopting teams, is to create a Teams team, okay? That is the place that people go for help. They can post questions. Your IT team, your support team, and your champions can watch that and can provide answers. You'll find eventually that people start answering. You'll find that, sorry, my digital assistant's trying to talk to me in the middle of a webinar. But you'll find that people will start answering other people's questions there as well. So you can kind of build some momentum that way and help people to get used to it. You can also find that's a good place for you to announce things. So if you're going to announce new features that you're enabling, if you're going to announce use cases that you think are important, if you want to publish help items like we just talked about using the VisualSP Teams app, okay, that's a great place to do it. You'll get the attention of people that were looking for help and that we're trying to collaborate with others about this new platform, and you'll also easily give them access to it, give them some experience using Teams that way. Another thing for you to think about is to use this application that we were demonstrating for you a second ago. Remember, VisualSP can show up here at the top. So you notice we can show VisualSP as a tab within Teams. You can provision this for people when you're creating them, if you're essentially controlling those. You can also use VisualSP in the chat places, remember? So down here at the bottom, we had the way to use VisualSP down here at the bottom. Sorry, when I uninstalled and reinstalled, I apparently did the dev with one and the production with the other. Sorry, I was clicking and talking at the same time, so I get a little weird combination here. Okay. But anyway, we would encourage you to use these things. They're very easy ways for you to give people real help. If you're not familiar with VisualSP, the idea is these are not courses. These are quick answers for how do I do something. So the videos are under 2 minutes. Not everything is a video. Some of them are quick reference cards or web pages or things that are tutorials about it. So it's quick ways that you can answer a question, or you can encourage someone or give somebody a tip without needing to get a half an hour of their time to watch an e-learning course. So we would encourage you to use tools like that. By the way, we have an offer out there now where you can install this Teams app for free. You'll get the Microsoft Learning Pathways content. This is the hundreds of help items they have for Office 365 and their desktop applications. You'll get all of that stuff delivered in the Teams interface for free. We also have another free offer that we want to mention. I'll go ahead and advance to our thank you slide here. If your organization is currently having a lot of people working remotely and it's a challenge, we're seeing a lot in social media right now where people are talking about how painful this is, how glad they'll be when they can get back to the office. Organizations rethinking the whole idea of letting people work remotely. Consider what you can do to make the experience better before you just punt on it. So this is the one for individuals that you can do. This is the one that you can do also as an organization. You can have for this help not just in Teams, but also in the browser when people are using Office 365. These are both free offers the VisualSP is doing. And of course, we have premium offers that you can get additional functionality and ways for you to get more content, create more types of content and things like that. But we wanted to make sure everybody is aware of those because they're kind of a no-brainer. It costs you nothing to do these things. We are happy to be helpful. So I'll leave this on screen so you can take a picture of those links or copy them down if you like. When we make the recording available, we'll make this PowerPoint presentation available then as well. And you can get the links from that as well if you prefer. So thank you very much. Are there any other questions from the panel that we should talk about? Awesome.
Sure. There's one question by Hazel that came a while back, but I didn't want to interrupt at that time. So Hazel's asking, I presume, and by the way, referring to the comments you made earlier in a document that was open, that I presume that the comments when you open a file that has been added to the team are added to that file only. I was wondering how that looks.
Yes, that's a good question. Let me go back to that. And actually for that one, instead of doing the Excel file, we did that in temporary parking, didn't we? Think of where we were. Yep. So we did it with an Excel file, which is fine. I really like the commenting experience in Word, but your question applies either way. See, there's two things that we get available to us up here. We have comments and we have conversation. Conversation is going into that team channel in Teams in the background. The comments are going into the file itself, just like they would otherwise. So if I click here and insert a new comment, hello world, put it in, that comment is here in the file, just like it would be if you had opened Excel on your desktop and inserted comments that way. So comments look different in Excel than they do in Word, but it's the same idea for your question. Comments are in the file itself, no matter how you open it up, they'll be there. Conversation is for that Teams collaboration that's happening in your channel in the background. So you can do either or you can do both. We actually internally, we wind up using both. You know, if it's a Word document we're putting up that we want everybody's feedback on, we turn on track changes, you know, just like we would have otherwise. We post it in a channel, much like this one, and then everybody just clicks on it and they start making changes and adding comments. And if we want to mention someone, a lot of times we'll do that over here in the conversation to get somebody's attention right away while we're working on it. Because that's pretty cool too. Asif and I could both open the same document, be making changes at the same time and be talking about it over here in the panel. Really nice functionality. Did I answer the question or did I make it more confusing? Sorry, I get excited.
I think it was perfect.
Too much information.
Yep.
That's right.
Hazel says, thanks for the clarification.
Great. Good one. Okay, well, that puts us right at time. So thanks again, everybody, for attending. Do stay tuned. We will get the recording and the PowerPoint deck posted very shortly. Thanks
Thanks
everybody.
a lot, Eric. Yes, thank you everybody for coming.